The fire alarm screamed through the corridors of Vanguard Chemical Processing as I emptied my desk drawers for the last time. Red emergency lights pulsed across the control room walls while I stacked my notebooks and certification folders into a cardboard box. The halon suppression test button had been tripped again by some panicked intern. Exactly the kind of sloppy oversight I'd warned Marcus about repeatedly over the past 14 months. My name still glowed on the override panel: Emily Harper, Director of Safety and Compliance. I stopped for a second, fingers hovering near the console. But then I remembered Marcus Hale's face during our final meeting, that slick, self-satisfied smirk he wore whenever he closed a big vendor deal or bragged about slashing another department's headcount. "Safety's first on the chopping block in this lean transformation," he'd announced, as if I were some expendable clerk instead of the woman who'd kept OSHA, EPA, and our insurers from burying us in violations for 13 straight years. 13 years. 13 years of midnight audits. Rewriting emergency protocols after every near miss. Personally training every shift on lockout-tagout procedures, and quietly replacing outdated piping before a single rupture could turn the entire facility into a toxic cloud over rural Indiana. All of it dismissed as overhead bloat during the quarterly review. HR slid me a thin manila envelope marked exit packet while Marcus watched from the doorway like he expected a standing ovation for his cost-saving genius. My access badge still scanned perfectly when I walked out. No one had deactivated it yet. The October wind bit hard in the parking lot as I dropped the badge into my bag. I could still smell the industrial-grade citrus cleaner I'd switched to last spring to cut down on respiratory complaints, another unthinked improvement. My hands weren't shaking from rage exactly. It was more like a sudden, bone-deep emptiness. This plant had survived 4 major EPA inspections, 2 chemical storage expansions, and a lightning strike that nearly ignited the solvent tanks. I designed the grounding upgrades myself. Now I was erased like yesterday's shift log. Marcus hadn't even waited for fiscal year-end. He'd called it agile resource reallocation right in front of the finance director, who nodded along as if common sense could replace calibrated gas detectors on a catwalk slick with residue. Safety isn't flashy. It's the accidents that never happen, the headlines that never get written, the workers who go home with all 10 fingers. I'd made it look effortless. And that was my fatal error. Marcus, in his pressed khakis and monogrammed cufflinks, had simply assigned a dollar value to my absence and moved on. I drove home in silence past the rail spur where we'd almost lost a subcontractor 3 years earlier to a blind reversing zone. I'd installed the flag system, convex mirrors, new SOPs, and backup alarms, all within budget. No transition memo requested. Marcus was convinced my entire function amounted to unnecessary paperwork. But the way he'd phrased it, the casual contempt mixed with pride in the projected savings, kept looping in my head. No more safety drag on margins. Streamlined. Efficient. I'd heard those exact words before disasters at other plants, right before someone lost an eye or worse. That night I unpacked the box at my kitchen table and found the final audit binder still inside. My handwriting on every checklist, flammable storage logs, ladder rotations, confined space permits. Page after page clean, signed, dated. Then the thought landed like a dropped wrench. If I'm gone, who's actually watching now? The quiet in my house thickened into something heavier. Not fury exactly, more like a dense pressure building behind my sternum. Marcus didn't get to treat 13 years of institutional knowledge as disposable spreadsheet fat. He didn't get to erase the one person who knew exactly where the buried solvent lines crossed the high-voltage conduits, or which valve assemblies still needed retrofitting after the last corrosion survey. By morning I was on my second coffee, scrolling job postings for rockstar EHS leaders, when my phone rang. It was Paul from Sentinel Risk Consultants, one of the third-party auditors who'd reviewed Vanguard twice annually. Weird question, he began. Your name is still the primary contact on all the active site permits. Are you still the safety director? I let out a short, hollow laugh. Not anymore. Marcus decided compliance was a luxury expense. Awkward pause. Got it. The filings still route through your credentials, though. Unless they've updated the back end, which, knowing the guy, he didn't finish. We both knew Marcus avoided administrative systems unless there was a press opportunity attached. I thanked him, ended the call, and stared at the steam curling from my mug. My name remained listed everywhere that mattered. State Workplace Registry, OSHA designated contact, Sentinel's own policy portal. No replacement hired. No internal announcement. Just a vacuum in the most critical role at a facility handling volatile organic compounds and pressurized gases daily. My fingers moved almost on their own. I opened my archived work drive, miraculously still accessible, and pulled the last email chain between Marcus and Sentinel's risk adjustment team. There it was. Bolded subject line. Operational streamlining update, eliminating redundant compliance overhead. The final paragraph proudly declared, effective immediately. Vanguard Chemical has removed the dedicated safety officer position. No more redundant oversight layers. Leaner operations moving forward. Timestamped 2 days after my termination. Sent directly to the people who literally held the keys to our liability coverage. I sat perfectly still. He hadn't just fired me. He'd bragged about it to the insurer as if announcing a brilliant innovation. No transitional plan. No interim consultant. No advisory extension. Just a boastful blank space. The low pulse behind my eyes wasn't rage. It was colder, disbelief mixed with dawning clarity. Marcus had lit the match and tossed it toward the sprinkler system while claiming the building was fireproof. All those years documenting every inspection. Lobbying for better racking. Separating incompatible chemicals after the 2019 near-miss, he'd reduced it all to optional theater. I downloaded the full thread, attached my termination letter for context, and opened the state compliance portal. The form asked, "Are you the currently designated safety officer?" My name was still there in black and white, tied to active permits. I checked every attached document 3 times, email chain, org chart still highlighting my role in yellow. Screenshot of the registry. Then I ticked yes. Attached everything. Hit submit. No fanfare. Just a quiet submission received. I closed the laptop and listened to the silence of my kitchen. No movie music vindication. I wasn't even sure anything would happen. But someone needed to remember that cutting corners isn't the same as removing the pin from your own grenade. Marcus Hale had just bet the entire plant that luck would hold forever. The first ripple came through an old shift supervisor named Terry. We hadn't spoken since the company holiday party where Marcus tried grilling steaks on an unauthorized loading dock barbecue. His text was simple. Emergency reinspection team showed up unannounced today. Boss looked like he'd swallowed bad milk. I stared at the message, surprised by how quickly my quiet submission had escalated. I'd expected it to vanish into some underwriter's backlog. Instead, Sentinel Risk had clearly read every attachment and moved fast. Soon more fragments arrived. A logistics coordinator mentioned sudden requests for full chemical storage manifests and 18-month drill records. Our last documented full-scale evacuation drill? 6 months old. Written entirely by me. Facilities forwarded a voicemail of Marcus ranting about disgruntled ex-employees manufacturing bureaucratic sabotage. He'd stormed the morning briefing, accusing the now non-existent safety subcommittee of inviting external interference. The irony was thick enough to choke on. I didn't reply to any of them. I let the current carry events forward. I wasn't hoping for lawsuits or firings. I just knew the infrastructure I'd built over 13 years, the invisible scaffolding of permits, protocols, and documentation, and exactly where the stress points were beginning to show. Little cracks appeared first. Certain high-hazard reagents were placed on shipping hold pending policy review. Contractors started demanding updated indemnification clauses before signing new badges. Word spread that a senior Sentinel representative had flown in and spent hours in the control room scrutinizing CCTV coverage angles for blind spots I'd flagged years ago. Marcus despised paperwork and external oversight. Now he was drowning in both. Safety work is invisible when done right. People only notice when it vanishes. Like when no one could locate current fire evacuation maps because Marcus had ordered non-essential binders shredded to free shelf space for a fancy espresso machine in the break room. I could have warned him anonymously. I could have sent a polite note. Update the permits. Hire a certified replacement. Treat audits seriously. But you don't extend that courtesy to someone who labeled you deadweight. You don't rescue the man who celebrated your erasure. So I stayed silent and watched the emails bounce between departments. The structure looked solid from outside until the ignored bolts began shearing. Vanguard had been running on borrowed integrity for years. My systems had been the hidden glue. Marcus had never seen them. Now gravity was doing its patient work. 3 weeks later, my phone lit up at 11:42 p.m. A message from Carla in admin, no text. Just a photo attachment. I opened it under the bedside lamp. Northern Sentinel letterhead. Formal notice of coverage termination. Immediate effect. Carla had highlighted one paragraph in yellow. My eyes locked on the damning sentence. Thank you for confirming via internal correspondence that your facility no longer retains a qualified safety officer, constituting a material breach of Policy Clause 4.7b. The quote that followed was verbatim from Marcus's proud email, effective immediately. Vanguard Chemical has removed the dedicated safety officer position. No more redundant oversight layers. His exact wording, timestamp, and signatures stared back. Effective immediately. General liability, environmental impairment, and workers' compensation policies were no longer in force. I sat up, walked to the kitchen in the dark, poured water, and let the reality settle. Marcus had done it to himself. No elaborate revenge plot. Just his own arrogance. Gift-wrapped and mailed directly to the legal department holding the coverage. He tried to be clever, save a salary, look modern, trim fat. Instead, he'd publicly documented the absence of a required safety officer, violating 3 core non-waivable conditions. They didn't even need further investigation. His email was the confession. I imagined the boardroom panic. Marcus pacing, legal scrambling, someone finally asking who authored the email, and Marcus, oblivious to consequences, raising his hand with pride. That night, I slept deeply for the first time since the firing. Not from triumph. From the simple physics of a burden finally shifting onto the shoulders that had created it. The accident happened at 2:17 a.m. 2 nights later. A corroded valve assembly on the North Solvent Transfer Line, one I'd recommended replacing 18 months earlier, failed under pressure. Toxic vapor cloud released across the loading area. 2 night shift technicians rushed to the ER with respiratory distress. Both stabilized. But the incident made local news before sunrise. Aerial shots showed the plant wrapped in red tape. Hazmat teams in moon suits. The reporter's voice cut through. Questions are swirling because Vanguard Chemical had no certified safety officer on record at the time of the release. Northern Sentinel confirms no active policy in place. The company may face direct liability. By noon, the first lawsuit dropped. One of the injured workers retained a firm known for turning workplace incidents into 7-figure settlements. The complaint was surgical, gross negligence due to absence of certified oversight in a high-hazard environment. Language pulled straight from clauses Marcus once dismissed as overkill. My phone exploded with messages from Terry, Carla, even Ron, the old foreman who'd grumbled about my drills but always showed up early. Ron's text was just one word. Boom. It said everything. Vanguard's LinkedIn page disabled comments. Their latest post about modernizing legacy operations drowned in criticism. Modernization without safety is just demolition in slow motion. Contractors and vendors began pulling out by evening. Nobody wanted association with an uninsured, regulator-targeted facility. A longtime chemical supplier emailed me directly. "Do you know who's handling safety now? We're getting zero answers." I didn't reply. The honest answer was, no one. That had been the fatal flaw all along. Marcus stayed publicly silent. No press conference. No statement. The absence screamed louder than denial. I pictured him in his office watching legal notices multiply, investor panic emails, and PR meltdown. This wasn't revenge. It was consequence. The difference mattered deeply to me. A month later, Marcus dragged Sentinel into court claiming bad faith denial over a temporary staffing change. His team arrived with binders and jargon. Operational discretion, industry norms, temporary lapse. They didn't survive the preliminary hearing. Sentinel's attorney placed a printed packet on the judge's bench and read aloud Marcus's own email, word for word, highlighting the exact admission of eliminating the safety officer role. Clause 4.7b was explicit and non-waivable. The judge barely glanced before dismissing the case. OSHA opened an investigation within days. The state environmental agency flagged 4 years of incomplete records. Fines began stacking, 6 figures before lawyers even sharpened pencils. Internally, they called it TRIA. Publicly, it was operational restructuring. Marcus blamed HR for sloppy offboarding. HR blamed legal. Legal blamed rapid change and outdated protocols. Everyone passed the live grenade, swearing it wasn't theirs. Nobody mentioned the woman who'd stood in the boiler hall with clipboard and highlighter, updating maps after walls were moved in 2019. My name vanished from conversation, yet every system remembered. 6 weeks after termination, I quietly joined a regional compliance consulting firm. My new manager didn't golf metaphors or treat expertise as cost. They called me when smoke was already rising. One morning, a courier delivered a thick envelope, no return address. Northern Sentinel letter addressed to me personally. Thank you for your documentation and timely alert. Formal enforcement enacted. Vanguard risk status updated. No drama. Just quiet realignment of systems with legal teeth. I filed it under resolved without fanfare. The final blow came via text from Terry. Vanguard shutting Northern operations indefinitely. Photo attached. Rusted scaffolding. Caution tape flapping like surrender flags. The plant sagged as if finally exhaling its last breath. No press releases this time. Just silence. I typed back. Guest safety was never optional. Hit send. Archive the thread. Back at my laptop, the new file opened. Corporate risk, case study, self-sabotage via executive ego. I wrote headers. Timeline of decisions. Erased critical roles. Chain reaction from ignored warnings. Marcus had called me the person who slowed progress. All I'd ever asked was, what if the shortcut you're taking is the one that costs a life? He never had patience for that question. The rest stop waitress refilled my coffee. I nodded thanks and looked at the screen. Justice doesn't always arrive with gavels and shouting. Sometimes it's a silent shutdown. A blank space where a name used to be. Marcus saw me as a cost. The system recognized me as essential. The plant's collapse left workers scrambling. Families worried, and a community asking how such an obvious risk had been ignored. Marcus Hale's arrogance didn't explode dramatically. It eroded quietly until the ignored weight crushed everything. And I sat in the cafe booth, cursor blinking, wondering how many other plants across America were one dismissive email away from the same fate. Safety isn't red tape. It's the line between ordinary days and irreversible tragedy. Neglect doesn't forgive ego. The systems we build remember long after the people who erase them are gone.